Where do you go after that, Tommy? Wow. See, if you're not here every week, you miss some things. You get home about 12, I hope you'll turn on Channel 2. A few months ago, actually a few weeks ago, probably actually a few days ago, it seems now, a group of ministers and rabbis at the Detroit Roundtable came together, and it was late in the season, and they were very much concerned that Holocaust Remembrance Sunday would come and go, and that the Christian community, which has so much to say and to reflect upon in terms of the Holocaust, would pass it by. I said there are a number of things I thought we could do. Some of them worked, some of them didn't work. I had hoped to have a pulpit exchange and to have one of the outstanding rabbis who was not able to work it out be with us today to reflect on a number of things. With my preaching in his temple on Friday evening as a comparison of approaches. I took the Sunday in Detroit show, which I've been participating in, and asked them to do something they've never done before. Take an entire half-hour segment and turn it over to try to understand what the Holocaust is about. We talked at great length, and the people were a little nervous, and they decided we should bring in priests and rabbis and survivors and a whole host of people, and I said no. I want the people who are regularly hosts on the show to talk about it. And I said, why? I said, here's a bell telephone man who happens to be a Jew who hosts the show. Why shouldn't he reflect as a human being? Because it's not experts that have to face the Holocaust, it's each and every one of them. And here's a man from the Michigan Employment Security Commission who is facing the Holocaust daily in his work because there is harassment, there is no movements among whole groups of people to eliminate others and to define them out of their jobs. A young woman who also happens to work for Bell, who is responsible for training. A Christian needs to reflect upon her own existence. The hostess, Linda Wright Avery, black. A woman. In a world where the Holocaust is a continuing thing, where she herself could reflect upon who and what she was in good life. In 1933, the world changed. Not exactly in 1933. Of course, you recognize that. When Hitler came to power in Nazi Germany, it was not an instantaneous change, because what happens in the world is that evil never comes as some great cataclysmic blowing up. It's always somehow or another coming along very slowly, and then it begins to escalate. Between 1933 and 1938, there were all kinds of stages of things that were beginning to happen, and then Hitler moved into Poland. He began the systematic destruction of Polish intellectuals and leaders to weaken the country to a point where it would become a vassal state. The evil began to escalate. And behind the dust settled in 1945, somewhere between 40 and 60 million people lost their lives. 20 million Russians died in the Holocaust of the war. Russians and German Nazis killed Polish leadership and Serbian leadership. And the Eastern Bloc countries have not yet regained the kind of leadership that they had because of the slaughter. 11 million people were put to death systematically in concentration camps and death camps spread across Europe. 6 million of whom were Jews, 1 million of whom were children, Jewish children, slaughtered. The tragedy is so immense that we don't understand it. Unless we begin to fall down and to recognize that we're not talking about 50 million, we talk about a budget in the government of billions. What does that mean? We're talking about the death of single individuals tortured, hung, beaten, deprived, stolen from, defined out of humanity, and dying one by one in hideous, tortuous way. Elie Wiesel, who at the age of 16 went to Auschwitz. And when he entered Auschwitz, he was taken from his small little shtetl, the little Jewish town, and he, because he was young and healthy, was put to work pulling boulders off of the road. And an old man was pulling the boulders next to him. He said, I never saw his face. We had been lined up a little bit differently. Elie Wiesel says that he was frightened, and this old man said to him, what is your name? And he said, Elie Wiesel. And he said, where are you from? And he told him the little town. And he said to him, what were you doing when they took you? And he said, we were studying the Talmud, the Jewish writings. He said, what page? They told him. He said, continue. And he said he learned in the course of the days of Auschwitz that he had to survive and tell the story lest we forget. I do not want to continue to rehearse the horrors of the Holocaust. I do not want to talk about Elie Wiesel standing there and watching the hanging of a small boy. He did not die because he was hung in a way to cause him to die, but died slowly, choked to death, eyes puffing, and people crying out, where is God? Where is God? Until one old man said, he's hanging there on the gallows. Because that's the time an individual suffers. That suffering is caused by human hands. We recause the crucifixion, we recause the Holocaust, and we nail another nail into the solid foundations of hatred and hate. I want to focus on, why I want this anthem to be sung, and what I want you to begin to get a little bit of a glimmer with me on is that we have no hope of surviving today's world or any day's world one by one. We have hope of surviving only when and if we work together. And working together and standing together and being true to a Christian commitment is such a dynamic force that there is absolutely no way evil can stand. You doubt that. I'm going to read a little bit for you and then reflect together. In September of 1943, the Nazis announced that all the Jews of Denmark were to be rounded up and taken out in Rosenstadt, one of the concentration camps. It was a Jewish holiday. One of the things that Christians know about Judaism is the holidays, and they always arrange to attack on Jewish holidays. For on this date, April 13th, 1943, which on that day was the first day of Passover, the Germans moved into the Warsaw Ghetto. Last week, on the closing days of Passover, terrorists moved over the branch of a number of fences and attacked an essentially unarmed fortress. Somehow or another, ways which we do not know, found their way where? Not to where the arms were, not to where the men were, but to the nurses. And you saw the pictures as well as that. And the word came that the Jews met, that the Germans were on their way, but the Danish people said no. The bishop of the Danish Evangelical Church sent the following message to every single church in Denmark, not by mail, but by individually carried letters, because he did not want to take a chance that it would go astray. And the pastors on October 3rd, 1943, stood and said the following: I have a message from the Danish church. And hearing these words from the Danish church, all people rise and stand at attention. The Danish bishops have, on September 29th this year, forwarded the following communication to the leading German authorities through the heads of the government departments. Wherever Jews are persecuted as such on racial or religious grounds, the Christian church is on duty bound to protest against this action. Because we can never forget that the Lord of the Christian church, Jesus Christ, was born in Bethlehem of the Virgin Mary according to God's promise to his chosen people, Israel. The history of the Jewish people before the birth of Jesus contains the preparation of salvation God has prepared for all mankind in Christ. Persecution of the Jews conflicts with the recognition and love of man that are a consequence of the gospel which the Church of Jesus Christ was founded to preach. Christ is no respecter of persons, and he has taught us to see that every human life is precious in the eyes of God. We understand by freedom of religion the right to exercise our faith in God in accordance with vocation and conscience, and in such a way that race and religion can never in themselves be a reason for depriving a man of his rights, freedom, or property. Despite different religious views, we shall therefore struggle to ensure the continued guarantee to our Jewish brothers and sisters of the same freedom we ourselves treasure more than life itself. The leaders of the Danish church have a clear understanding of the duty to be law-abiding citizens and would never revolt needlessly against those who exercise the functions of authority over us. But our conscience obliges us at the same time to maintain the law and to protest against every violation of right. We will therefore unambiguously declare our allegiance to the doctrine that bids us obey God more than man. There were only 8,000 Jews in Denmark. The Nazis arrived, and of the 8,000 Jews, with less than 24 hours' notice, they could find 272. Some were in hospital, some were sick and too old to move. Some didn't believe it could happen. The rest disappeared. They disappeared into Danish homes and became part of Danish families. Ships which arrived to take all 8,000 left the harbor with nobody on, and a few Jews were taken to Theresienstadt, that terrible place. And over a period of time, the Danish government worked so long and hard with such protests that the Jews were returned to Denmark. Really? They were returned. Those who had been taken were returned. 52 had died of hunger or disease or AIDS, but the rest were returned. The Nazi buses drove them out of Germany through Copenhagen to board the ships that would carry them to Sweden. The moment those buses crossed the Danish border, they were surrounded by hundreds of thousands of Danes. They lined the sidewalks. They filled the streets and stopped the buses. They handed out flowers and candy and cigars to the bus windows, and they carried signs that read "Velkommen to Denmark." Welcome to Denmark. The Jews in the buses, who were those themselves who remember, stood up and sang. Stood up and sang their national anthem. I pause to talk about this, not because it happened and shows that things can happen, but because it's part of the lessons to be learned. And I'd like to briefly and very quickly to understand some of the lessons we need to learn, because we have not learned them. To this very day, we are witnessing the slaughters of people. And one of the horrors of what happened in the Second World War is that it legitimized and desensitized us to mass slaughter. Before that time, and some of you who go back and span the years can remember the absolute shock that during the Second World War, when it became apparent that people were being slaughtered, the absolute shock that was beginning to break into the minds of some of you, because such things should not be. Am I right? And now you talk to kids about the killing of 400,000 Christians by Idi Amin in Uganda, and they don't even understand it. You talk to kids about the slaughter of Christians in Lebanon, they don't understand it. You talk to kids about the slaughter of Muslims in Afghanistan by Russian troops who are dropping bombs in the mountains on villages, they don't understand it. They are so desensitized to mass murder that they don't understand it. And the world knows it. Kill one man and you're in trouble. Kill a million and nobody pays any attention. part of the horror of the Holocaust that continues is our own insensitivity to Cambodia, to the starving that's going on there, to the mass slaughter, 4 million by the communists. Once again, we nail Jesus to the cross, and once again we tell Hitler he was right, and once again we deny our God. And once again the crowd stands and cries out, "Where is God?" And a quiet voice can only point out, "Pain, there." One of the things that the Nazis were able to do was convince the world that there was no resistance. There's still a myth that the Jews went to the slaughter like little lambs. It's not true. The Warsaw Ghetto that I've already mentioned, which broke out on this date in 1943, was one of the fine examples of where people stood up against tremendous odds and fought with no support. There were tremendous numbers of resistance groups, not only within the Jews, but among the countries themselves. And you can name the country, and you can talk about the groups and what they did, but they were not successful, not because of a lack of fighting, not because of a lack of trying, not because of a lack of anything except that when the powers of a magnificent state like Germany was are turned towards evil, it is so powerful that no one individual, no one group of individuals, no one area can stand. Which one of us can stand the power of this great nation of ours? Which one of us has the ability to stand up and to halt an evil force when it's got the power of the government behind it? Which one of us would dare stand against the troops that could be massed outside this door and walk down here and grab Pastor Lyons out of the pulpit and say, "You are not giving the party line. You are dead"? No woman can stand in the job place under harassment with catcalls and whistles and sexual overtones, denigrated because no matter what the talents are, there are those who will never accept and fight back. Without strong people, including men and women, standing up and saying, "Enough! We will not allow the harassment and dehumanization of people we work with." No black can change American society. He can become educated. He can drink the best scotch. He can go to the best universities. He can learn to appreciate the best music. He can sing with the most beautiful voices. He can run against the Nazis in 1936. But he can't change the fact that he's black. People continue to say, "Well, blacks, it's their responsibility. They've got to adjust to us." Then we will lose and once again nail Jesus to the cross. And once again hang the young lad and confirm the Nazism and say, "Where is God? He's hanging there." No one individual can bring about change. It isn't a Mr. Carter or a Mr. Reagan or a Mr. Kennedy or a Mr. Bush or a Mr. Anderson that's going to change where America is. It's not a Mr. Iacocca that's going to change where Chrysler is. No one individual has that kind of a power. What it takes is an awful lot of people working together, both for good and for evil. It was not Hitler that was evil. It was the fact that people listened to and followed and supported and gave. In Las Vegas, a woman known as Death Angel is now facing trial for putting to death individuals who were hopelessly ill. I know it made her tick, but she's not what bothers me. The people that stood by and watched and joked and made bets about who would be next. What a scary thing. That there are evil doers in the world we accept, but that those evil doers do not have anybody to stand up and say no. It's a tragedy. Witness the death in this century alone one by one, of over 100 million people, reward violence. And each one of those deaths for me as a Christian, the hammer, the hammer, the hammer. Then I listen. And I'm inspired. Ride on, King Jesus. I don't care whether I like Jews or not. I don't care whether I like blacks or not. I don't care whether I like women or not. I don't care whether I like anybody or not. The problem is not whether I like somebody or not, but my God-given demand and commandment is, you shall not remain silent and re-crucify your Lord, but speak out lest we forget. And when we speak out, when we stand side by side, when we call a halt to evil, when we take that which is evil and black and in the deep depths of our existence and put the full light of God upon it so it must stand open and out, evil has no place to hide. It is not beautiful, it is not comic, it is nothing but ugly and disappearing. Power. God. Not only to work deep within me, but to cause us to stand together, to lend a hand, and to make it work.